Words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Special people. I, who for 3 years had paid their monthly rent of $500, bought every piece of furniture in their house, and filled their refrigerator when they had nothing to eat. I was not a special person. I stood there in the living room of my own house, holding the phone as if it weighed 1,000 pounds, watching my son avoid my gaze while Lena made herself comfortable on the sofa I had bought for them. The pale pink dress I had picked out for her wedding hung uselessly in my closet, along with the new shoes and the illusion of being part of the most important day of my only son's life. I had spent $200 on that dress, thinking about how nice I would look in Max's wedding photos in which I would never appear. For weeks, I had planned every detail. I had put money aside to give them $1,000 as a wedding gift. I had called my sister Diana in Chicago to tell her the good news. I had cleaned my house from top to bottom, thinking they might come celebrate with me after the ceremony. All of that collapsed in a second with those 4 poisoned words, "Only special people." Max finally lifted his gaze and said in a rehearsed-sounding voice, "Mom, it was an intimate thing. Very small, just the 2 of us and the witnesses." But I knew it was a lie. Dear listeners, I'm Auntie Grace. Welcome to True Heart Voices. Thank you for being here. If you love true stories, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. It helps keep these voices alive. I always find it fascinating to read which cities and countries you're listening from. So don't hesitate to write a comment. Let's talk about what really happened. I saw the photos on social media. I saw Lena's parents proudly posing next to the bride and groom. I saw her siblings toasting with champagne. I saw Lena's white dress, which I had helped finance with the $800 I had given her last month for her personal expenses. I saw everything I wasn't supposed to see. A week later, exactly 7 days after that humiliation, Lena called me with a completely different voice. She was no longer the confident woman who had excluded me from her wedding. Now she sounded desperate, almost pleading. "Renate," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "the rent is overdue. The landlord is pressuring us and says if we don't pay this week, he will kick us out. You forgot to make the transfer." Her voice trembled as if the world were ending. I was silent for a few seconds, remembering all the times I had run to the bank to make that transfer, all the times I had canceled my own plans to make sure they had a roof over their heads, all the times I had eaten beans and rice so I could give them money for their desires. And now, after they had excluded me from the most important moment of their lives, they had the audacity to call me as if nothing had happened. "Lena," I said, with a calm that surprised even me, "didn't I warn you that I only help special people?" The silence on the other end of the line was so deep that I could hear my own heart beating. For the first time in years, it was not I who was trembling, but her. "Renate, I don't understand," she stammered. "We were always special to you. You're like a second mom to me." Lies. All lies. Wrapped in that sweet voice she only used when she needed something. The same voice she had used to ask me for money for the wedding dress, for the honeymoon, for the rings, which I had helped finance without knowing I would never see the ceremony where they were exchanged. For so many years I had convinced myself that love and generosity could be enough. But I was wrong. I sank into the armchair across from the sofa, the one Max had insisted I should keep for decoration, and let the room settle around me. The air felt heavy. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, highlighting specks of dust that seemed to mock me, glittering like tiny reminders of everything I had given. I closed my eyes and tried to think back. When had it started? When did the cracks appear in the facade that I had believed was a loving, grateful family? I remembered the first subtle signs, Lena insisting she didn't need help while secretly texting Max that I was too involved, the way she carefully curated her posts on social media, always tagging Max, but never me. The soft smile she gave when I handed her cash or groceries, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And then there was Max, my boy, my baby, my heart. He had changed. Not overnight, not dramatically, but in tiny, almost invisible increments. Small omissions, casual lies, gentle silences that grew into a canyon between us. I told myself I was imagining it, that he was simply growing up, that he was choosing his partner, building a life. But deep down, I knew. I had always known. And yet, the betrayal still cut me to the bone. Because seeing the wedding photos on social media was not just a surprise. It was a public announcement that I had been erased, excluded, written out of a chapter of their lives that I had poured myself into. Every smile, every toast, every decorative flower, every ribbon in that photograph. It had my fingerprints on it, my money, my planning, my love. And yet I wasn't allowed to witness it. I didn't shout, I didn't cry, I just sat there, listening to the ticking clock in the silence of my house and let the enormity of the betrayal sink in. Then came the call about the rent. The same audacity that had allowed them to exclude me now dared to demand my help again. My generosity, which had once been freely given out of love, had been weaponized against me. I straightened my back, inhaled slowly, and whispered to the empty room, "No more." It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was clarity. For the first time in years, I saw the truth as it was. I was not just being hurt by exclusion. I was being used. Every gesture, every smile, every plea had been transactional, and I had been blind. I would not be blind anymore. I didn't know exactly how this story would unfold, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Lena would learn, sooner or later, that special people are not made. They are chosen, and I choose carefully. After the call ended, I sat in silence for a long while, letting the weight of the past weeks settle on me. I stared out the window at my garden, where the autumn leaves had begun to turn gold and red. The smell of damp soil and fallen leaves was comforting, grounding, a reminder that life continued, even when the people you love betray you. I thought back to the days before Lena had come into our lives, before all the money, the promises, the fake smiles. Max and I had a simple life, quiet, predictable, but filled with warmth. Every morning, he and I would sit at the kitchen table, drinking coffee while he read the newspaper or played with his cereal. I would pack his lunch, carefully folding his sandwiches, slipping notes into the bag that said, "I love you, Mom. Have a great day." Max had always been responsible, kind, and considerate. Not perfect, but thoughtful in ways that made my heart swell with pride. I remembered how he had insisted, at age 7, that I take a vacation on my birthday because I worked too hard. He had saved his allowance for months to buy me a small necklace one Christmas. He was my boy, my heart outside my body. Then Lena arrived. At first, she seemed normal, polite, friendly, a little shy, a little cautious. She smiled a lot, said the right things, complimented my home, complimented me. She was grateful for every gesture, and I thought, this is someone who will fit into our family well. I believed her. I wanted her to be part of our lives. And slowly, the cracks appeared. They were subtle at first. Little things I had dismissed. The way she never seemed to thank me sincerely when I brought over groceries, insisting she had it covered, even though she texted Max later asking him to remind Mom to leave the receipt, or how she always had some reason not to attend family dinners, even when I cooked her favorite dishes. Max, too, began to change. Not drastically, not openly, but just enough to make me notice if I was paying attention. He laughed less at my jokes. He started answering me with clipped sentences. He spent more time with Lena, talking in hushed tones, always looking over his shoulder. I remember the night I first realized something was wrong. We had planned a simple Sunday dinner: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, my homemade gravy. I had spent hours preparing, humming softly to myself in the kitchen. The table was set, Candles lit, and the smell of rosemary filled the air. Max and Lena arrived. Lena immediately took charge of the kitchen, as if mine wasn't good enough. She rearranged the silverware, commented on the roast. "It's good, but it's a little dry, don't you think?" And smiled as if she were giving a compliment. Max didn't defend me, not a word. He nodded along, agreeing politely. I swallowed the lump in my throat and served the food. Lena took a bite, paused, and said, "Oh, that's actually pretty good. You've improved." "Improved?" I asked, my voice tight. "It's the same recipe I've been making for 20 years. She laughed softly, the kind of laugh that slid under your skin. "Well, practice makes perfect." Max smiled faintly, but I saw it. The hesitation, the slight discomfort. He looked at Lena, then at me, and I realized something. The dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the center of his world. She had begun to take my place. Slowly, quietly, efficiently. I spent the next few weeks reflecting, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. I told myself that perhaps Lena didn't mean harm, that Max was simply growing up and making his own choices. But every interaction, every small comment, every whispered conversation I overheard when I dropped by unexpectedly chipped away at my peace of mind. It was the little things that broke me down the most. The way she subtly criticized my home when friends came over. The way she would smile at me, then immediately text Max about how helpful I had been that day. Almost like she was keeping score. The way she took my guidance, my gifts, my financial help, and turned them into opportunities to shine in front of Max. I tried to talk to Max about it once. "Mom," he said gently, "she's not trying to hurt you. She's just different. She's ambitious. She knows what she wants." I looked at him, trying to hold back tears. Ambitious is one thing. Disrespect is another. Do you not see how she treats me? He sighed. "Mom, please, don't make a big deal out of it. She's your daughter-in-law. Just be patient." Patient. I realized then that patience had been my undoing. My patience, my generosity, my love, all exploited. And still, I tried to see the good in her. Still, I tried to believe in my son. Still, I tried to hope that one day things would be normal again. Then came the wedding. It wasn't announced, not to me, not to anyone outside their carefully curated circle. I remember the day vividly. I was cleaning the house, humming softly, when a notification popped up on my phone. My sister Diana had sent me a link. Max and Lena's wedding photos. Look at them. Curiosity won over hesitation. I clicked, and I saw them. My chest tightened. Lena in a flowing white gown, radiant and poised. Max, smiling, hand in hers. Her parents beaming proudly. Her siblings holding glasses in a toast. Balloons, flowers, ribbons. Everything perfectly staged for a celebration I had helped fund, yet wasn't allowed to witness. My hands shook. My vision blurred. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I wanted to run to them, but I was rooted to the spot. I wanted to erase the photos from existence, but they were everywhere, shared online for all to see. I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life. And yet, beneath the humiliation, a strange clarity emerged. I had been blind to the way Lena had maneuvered herself into Max's life, blind to the small betrayals that built up over the years, blind to the reality that my generosity had been taken for granted, manipulated, weaponized. For the first time, I understood what I had been missing, the truth. I remember the week following the wedding vividly. Lena called. The same sweet, confident voice from before was gone. Now it was sharp, pleading, vulnerable. "Renati," she said, her voice trembling, "the rent is overdue. The landlord says, if we don't pay this week, he will kick us out. You forgot to make the transfer." I paused. My heart pounded, but I was no longer afraid. All those times I had canceled my own plans. All those nights I had eaten beans and rice to make sure they had what they needed. All those weeks I had emptied my pockets to ensure their comfort. It was all being used against me. No, I said simply. She gasped. What do you mean, no? You've always helped us. We were special to you. I let the words hang in the air. Lena, I said, calm but firm, didn't I tell you that I only help special people? Silence. For the first time in years, it was not I who trembled. Her voice quavered. Renate, I don't understand. We were always special to you. You're like a second mom to me. Lies, all lies. I had been blind to them for far too long, and yet now clarity had replaced my pain. I spent that evening reflecting. I walked through the house, touching objects I had purchased for them, the sofa she lounged on, the kitchen utensils I had gifted, the decorative lamp in the living room, every item a reminder of my generosity. And yet, in every object, I found resolve. I realized that day that being used and being respected were not the same thing, that love and money were not the same thing, that I had allowed my desire to nurture and give to override my own dignity. From that moment on, I made a decision. I would no longer be blind. I would no longer give blindly. I would watch, wait, and let the truth unfold naturally. And when it did, Lena and Max would understand what it truly meant to cross me. Because special people are chosen, not used. After the shock of the wedding, life didn't return to normal. Not really. Max acted as if everything were fine. Lena smiled politely when she visited, sometimes over-friendly, sometimes coldly indifferent. And yet, beneath every smile, I began to sense something was wrong. A quiet manipulation, an invisible hand moving pieces around a board I didn't even know existed. It started with small things, little inconsistencies that I had previously dismissed. I noticed that my financial contributions, which I had always given freely, were being referenced as obligations. Remember when you helped us with the deposit? She would say casually, almost as if reminding me I owed her something. Or when she would comment in passing, thanks again for your help. It made a huge difference, but in a tone that felt more like judgment than gratitude. Max, too, seemed different. More distant, polite but distant. He avoided conversations about finances, about family, about anything that mattered to me. His phone always buzzed, and sometimes I would catch him stepping out to take calls, murmuring words I couldn't hear. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. But intuition has a way of whispering truths that logic tries to ignore. 1. Evening, I decided to visit Max and Lena unannounced. I had been helping them with their bills less frequently now, partly out of pride, partly to observe how they handled themselves without me. I knocked softly on the door. Lena answered, looking as polished and perfect as ever. "Oh, hi, Renat. What a surprise," she said, the words dripping with warmth I didn't trust. I stepped inside, and immediately something felt off. The apartment was immaculate, too immaculate. Every cushion fluffed, every surface polished. It smelled faintly of perfume and something else I couldn't quite place. A faint smell of burning sugar, maybe from a candle, but it didn't linger in a comforting way. It was calculated, staged. As I poured coffee for myself, I noticed a stack of unopened bills on the counter. My pulse quickened. These were the bills I knew they were supposed to manage themselves. I picked one up. The due date was yesterday. I asked casually, "Did you manage to pay this on time?" Lena's smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. She replied smoothly, "Oh yes, we took care of it." Her tone was precise, rehearsed, just like the words she had spoken the day of the wedding, and yet the bill was untouched. I picked it up again. The envelope had never been opened. My heart sank, not out of financial concern, but out of recognition. This was the first visible crack in their carefully constructed facade. I looked at Max, who avoided my gaze. Something in his posture betrayed him, the subtle tension of someone holding a secret. That night, I sat in my living room, replaying the scene in my mind. Lena's rehearsed voice, the unopened bills, Max's subtle avoidance, all signs pointing to the same truth. My heart thudded with a mix of fear and clarity. Something was happening behind my back, something that would soon reveal itself fully. Over the next several weeks, I began to notice more. Little moments that once seemed innocuous now felt like puzzle pieces falling into place. Lena would casually forget to mention conversations with Max, small yet deliberate omissions. She had a way of turning every discussion to her favor, carefully weaving narratives that left me questioning myself. Then came the strange phone calls. She would call, voice sweet, almost pleading, saying, "Renate, we need to talk about the rent, about the bills. Can you help?" And sometimes she would call from another phone, pretending it was Max, asking about the same payments. The audacity made my blood boil, but also sharpened my focus. One evening, I noticed something else. A package had been delivered to their apartment. No return address. I'd been unaware of it until Max slipped a text, almost as an afterthought. "Mom, don't worry about it." Curiosity gnawed at me. That night, I drove past their building, parking a few blocks away. From the darkness of my car, I saw Lena carrying a box into the apartment, looking around as if to make sure no one was watching. My pulse raced. What could be in that box that required such secrecy? A week later, I learned the truth, or at least the first part of it. I received a message from a neighbor, someone I had always trusted. She said, "Renate, I don't want to intrude, but I saw Max and Lena at the courthouse last week. They were doing something. Not sure what, but it didn't look casual." The word courthouse sent chills down my spine. My mind raced. Weddings, business, legal papers. Then a memory surfaced. The wedding photos I had stumbled upon online. Could they have gotten married in secret? And if so, why? I decided I needed to investigate. Quietly, carefully. I couldn't confront them yet. That would alert them. I needed proof, clarity, something undeniable. My days became a careful balancing act. I maintained civility when I visited, keeping my voice calm, my tone measured. I smiled when Lena smiled. I complimented Max when he asked. And yet inside I was observing, collecting, noting every discrepancy, every unusual behavior. I noticed patterns. She had a habit of leaving small notes for Max, always signed in a way that seemed casual but was intimate. "Don't forget. We'll talk later. Love, L." He responded, always carefully, but sometimes the reply seemed rushed, tense. I began to look deeper. Social media, text notifications, subtle changes in scheduling. The more I observed, the more I realized how meticulously orchestrated their actions were. This was not just carelessness or youthful rebellion. This was strategy. And then came the most damning clue of all. I received a package in the mail, addressed to me but from an unknown sender. Inside were copies of receipts for wedding flowers, the catering, even Lena's dress. The kicker? My financial contributions were clearly marked on each receipt. Every dollar I had given, every bit of support I had provided was documented as though it were her credit, not mine. The final note included with the receipts read, in careful handwriting, "Thank you for helping us make our day perfect. You're a special person." I crumpled the note in my hands, tears streaming silently down my face. Rage, heartbreak, humiliation, all swirling together in a storm I had never experienced before. It was then I realized they had deliberately kept me out, staged the wedding as if I were irrelevant, and yet had ensured that I paid for it. Not just financially, but emotionally. Every effort I had made, every sacrifice, every ounce of love had been manipulated, and I, for all my patience, all my hope, had been blind. From that moment I vowed to watch, to wait, to let the truth reveal itself fully, because those who manipulate, who betray, who erase the people who love them, cannot hide forever. And in the quiet moments that followed, as I sat alone in my living room, sipping lukewarm tea, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: power. Not the kind that comes from control over others, but clarity, awareness, knowledge. The first clue had appeared. The first cracks were showing, and I would be ready when the entire facade finally fell apart. If you're listening to this story, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. It helps keep these voices alive. Now, sit back for a moment, get comfortable, and let's talk about where we end. It was a Wednesday morning when everything finally came crashing down. I had been feeling a strange tension for days, the kind that wraps around your chest and refuses to let go. Something in the air, in the silence of my own home, told me that the truth was about to reveal itself. The call came from a number I didn't recognize. "Renate?" a voice said, carefully measured, cautious. "Yes," I answered, suspicion lacing every word. I think you should see this," the voice said, hesitating. "It's about Max and Lena, their wedding. I have proof." My stomach dropped. I could barely breathe. "Proof?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. "Yes, photos, documents, everything. I can send them to you." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I felt my hands shake as I pulled my laptop closer. My heart thudded violently against my chest. Then the emails began arriving, one after another. Photos, screenshots, scanned documents, all evidence of what I had feared. There they were, Lena and Max, standing in front of the courthouse holding hands, exchanging vows in a small, intimate ceremony I had never been invited to. I saw her in the same pale pink dress I had suggested for the wedding that was never hers to wear in front of me. The same dress I had painstakingly purchased, imagining the photos, imagining the joy, imagining my place in her family. And there was Max, smiling awkwardly, glancing at Lena with a mix of pride and obligation. Not love, not gratitude, just the weight of being caught in something he hadn't had the courage to stop. Then the documents, the official marriage certificate, filed a week before the photos had surfaced online. Lena had orchestrated everything in secret, from the paperwork to the flowers, the small gathering, even the tiny reception afterward. Every detail designed to exclude me. Every detail designed to make me feel invisible. My vision blurred. My hands were trembling, and for a long moment, I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to run, to destroy the laptop, to erase the evidence from existence. But I couldn't. It was all real, all undeniable. I remember sinking into the sofa, clutching the laptop to my chest. The room around me faded. The autumn leaves outside the window, the smell of the tea I had forgotten to finish, even the gentle ticking of the clock. Everything faded. All that remained was the betrayal. For 3 years I had given. Money, love, patience, guidance. And for what? To be excluded from the most important day of my son's life? To be replaced by someone who had never truly respected me? Someone who had manipulated every ounce of my generosity for her own gain? I couldn't believe it. And yet I knew it had been there all along, hiding in plain sight. The subtle dismissals, the quiet omissions, the staged smiles, the calculated words. Lena had played a masterful game, and I had been the unwitting player. The next few days were a haze of anger, sadness, and quiet observation. I needed answers, not assumptions. I needed to see their reactions, their true colors, exposed for everyone to witness. I began by visiting their apartment under the guise of casual concern. I brought over groceries, my old habit of care. But this time, I watched. I watched Lena move through the space, smiling, arranging, always performing. I watched Max, hesitant, uneasy, a man caught between loyalty to me and fear of his wife. And then it happened. A neighbor, whom I had always trusted, came by unexpectedly while I was there. She paused at the doorway, her eyes wide, voice low. Renate, you should know. I saw Lena the other day. She was talking to someone about the wedding, not just casual conversation. She was bragging about how she kept it all secret from you. My blood ran cold. Bragging. She wasn't just manipulating, she was proud. Proud of the betrayal, proud of the deceit, proud of the control she had over me and over Max. I excused myself quickly, my mind racing. I returned home, pacing the floor, trying to digest the reality. This wasn't just hurt feelings. This was intentional, orchestrated betrayal. A week later, I decided to confront Lena directly. Not in anger, not in public, but privately, with measured words and calm resolve. I called her, voice steady. "Lena, we need to talk," I said. There was a pause, then a soft, rehearsed laugh. "Oh, Renate, about what?" "About the wedding, about the money, about everything you kept from me." Her voice faltered slightly, just enough to betray her rehearsed calm. "Renate, I don't know what you mean." I took a deep breath, my hands trembling but my voice firm. "Don't play games with me, Lena. I know everything. The photos, the certificate, the receipts. You planned this to exclude me, to manipulate me, to control Max, and to profit from my generosity." Silence. Finally a whisper. "Renate, it's not like that." I laughed quietly, bitterly. "Not like that? You call this not like that?" I waved a hand at the evidence on my desk. Printed emails, copies of documents, screenshots of social media posts. "This is deliberate. You excluded me from my son's life for your own gain. You used my money, my love, my trust. And now you call it not like that." Her voice was trembling now. I didn't mean, it wasn't personal." I let her words hang in the air. I didn't respond immediately. I sat in silence, feeling the full weight of her deceit. Every lie, every manipulation, every smile that had masked her intentions. I cataloged it all in my mind, and then I said, calmly but firmly, it was personal, and it was cruel. But now I know, and knowing changes everything. After that confrontation, I felt a strange mix of relief and determination. The betrayal had been revealed, and while the pain was sharp, the clarity it brought was even sharper. I began documenting everything, keeping careful notes of their behavior, their words, their manipulations. I realized I needed a plan, not to destroy them, not to humiliate, but to ensure that justice, or at least acknowledgement of the truth, would come. I started by quietly reaching out to people who had been involved in the wedding, distant relatives, friends who had been invited, even the officiant. Each conversation, each confirmation, built a web of undeniable truth. The wedding had been a complete secret. I had been intentionally excluded, and Lena had orchestrated it with precision. Max's role was more complicated. I saw now that he had been both complicit and trapped. He hadn't initiated the deceit, but he hadn't stopped it. He had allowed it to happen. And that, too, I realized, was betrayal. Not just of me, but of his own integrity. I spent the next few days in quiet reflection, letting my emotions settle into a cold, steady resolve. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was controlled. I would not react impulsively. I would not give Lena and Max the satisfaction of a dramatic confrontation. Instead, I would wait, watch, observe. And when the time was right, the consequences would follow naturally, because betrayal, especially calculated betrayal, always leaves traces, and I was determined to find every one of them. The first cracks in their perfect facade began to appear almost immediately. Lena, confident and smug, made mistakes. Small, careless ones. She would leave receipts where they shouldn't be. She would mention the wedding in passing to someone who had no reason to know. Max would flinch when questioned, revealing more in subtle body language than words ever could. I watched silently, patiently. Every slip, every hesitation, every accidental admission was cataloged. I didn't act immediately. I didn't need to. The truth was unraveling itself, and I was ready to witness it. And in those moments of quiet observation, I realized something profound: the power of awareness, of knowledge, of clarity. I was no longer blind, no longer naive. The betrayal had been exposed, and I was ready for what came next. The days after I discovered the full extent of Lena's deception felt heavy, almost oppressive. It wasn't just the shock of being excluded from the wedding or the betrayal of trust. It was the realization that I had been manipulated for months, if not years. Every gesture of gratitude I had offered, every penny I had given, every late-night run to the bank, it had all been leveraged against me. But for the first time in a long while, I felt a sharp clarity. Pain had turned into purpose. My rage wasn't loud, wasn't explosive. It was deliberate, quiet, precise. This wasn't about revenge in the petty sense. It was about reclaiming dignity, ensuring accountability, and witnessing the truth unfold in a way that could not be denied. I started small. Observation. Patience. I began keeping a detailed journal of everything Lena and Max did: what bills they paid, what purchases they made, the hours they were away from home, the people they contacted. Even the smallest inconsistencies mattered. One night, I noticed Lena leaving the apartment with a large tote bag. Curiosity drove me to follow at a discreet distance. She walked quickly, checking over her shoulder, eyes sharp. She entered a storage unit several blocks away. I didn't approach, I didn't confront. I merely recorded the moment, noting the time, location, and description of the bag. I began checking public records quietly, methodically. Marriage licenses, property transactions, business registrations. Each document told a piece of the story, each a testament to their careful orchestration and my own exclusion. And then came the first opportunity to act. Lena had invited me to her apartment under the pretense of a small dinner. Something intimate, casual, motherly. I agreed, but I went with a plan. I arrived early, casually, carrying a homemade pie. The smell of cinnamon and apples filled the apartment as I stepped inside. Lena greeted me with her practiced smile. Max, as always, seemed nervous, avoiding eye contact, fiddling with a fork. I didn't mention the wedding. I didn't accuse. Not yet. Instead, I spoke of mundane things: family, neighbors, weather. The small talk lulled them into comfort. And then, when the moment was right, I brought out a photo album. "Oh, I thought you might like to see some old pictures of the kids," I said casually, sliding it across the table. Lena leaned in, interest feigned, while Max glanced at me with caution. As they flipped through the album, I watched their reactions, carefully. Then casually, I opened to a page that contained pictures I had secretly compiled. Screenshots of the courthouse photos, the official marriage certificate, the receipts, and even the notes that showed how my contributions had funded the wedding. Lena froze, her hands hovering over the page. Max looked down, shame and fear evident in his posture. I smiled softly, almost imperceptibly. "Funny, isn't it?" I said calmly. "How little things can reveal the truth." She didn't speak. Her carefully maintained composure cracked for the briefest moment. I didn't push. I let the silence do the work, let the weight of exposure settle in. Over the next few days, I continued to act with careful precision. I didn't confront publicly. I didn't make threats. Instead, I allowed them to reveal themselves through their own actions. I reached out quietly to the few people who had attended the secret wedding, not with anger, not with accusation, but with curiosity. Questions like, how was the ceremony? Who was there? Did they mention family members? The responses were revealing. Every casual remark, every slight slip, confirmed the narrative I already knew. Meanwhile, Lena began to show signs of strain. She became hyper-vigilant, constantly checking her phone, rechecking the calendar, muttering apologies to Max in hushed tones. Max's demeanor changed too. He became quieter, more reserved, caught between the reality of what had happened and the knowledge that the truth was out, quietly but irrevocably. Then came the confrontation I had been waiting for. Not forced, not dramatic, but inevitable. One evening I received a text from Max. "Mom, can we talk? It's important." I agreed. I went over to their apartment, calm, composed. Lena was there, but she didn't greet me with her usual warmth. Instead, she sat rigidly on the sofa, hands clasped, eyes downcast. Max stood near the kitchen, looking nervous. I took a deep breath, settling myself. "I think it's time we spoke honestly," I said, voice steady. "There's no point in hiding the truth anymore." They didn't respond immediately. The tension was thick, almost suffocating. I began slowly, methodically. "I know about the wedding. I know how carefully you excluded me. I know about the money, the planning, the manipulation, and I know about the lies that masked your actions. I've documented everything." Lena's eyes widened, then filled with a flicker of panic. Max's jaw tightened. "I'm not here to yell," I continued, "but I am here to make one thing very clear. I will no longer be part of games, manipulations, or deceit. From this moment forward, your actions are your responsibility, and every misstep, every attempt to manipulate, every lie will be seen for what it is." I paused, letting the words sink in. Then I said, quietly, almost conversationally, "And the first step is acknowledgement. You must acknowledge what happened. To me. To yourselves." For the first time, Lena spoke, voice trembling. "Renate, I didn't think you would find out. I didn't mean it. It wasn't personal." I let her words hang in the air. "It was personal, and it hurt. But knowing changes things. You've taught me a lesson about trust, about boundaries, and about the importance of observing the truth before reacting." Max remained silent, shoulders slumped. I knew his silence was a confession of both guilt and helplessness. I leaned back, sipping a cup of tea I had brought with me, the calm before the storm of resolution. "I will not pretend this didn't happen. I will not allow it to continue. But I also won't destroy. The consequences will follow naturally in ways you cannot control." And slowly, carefully, I began to see the first signs of change. Lena's confidence wavered. Max's complicity weighed on him. The truth finally was breaking through the polished surface of their deceit. From that day on, I maintained a careful watch. I continued documenting, observing, noting every interaction, every slip, every inconsistency. But I also allowed small gestures of humanity to seep in. Acts of kindness, acknowledgement of mistakes, and subtle boundaries that ensured I was respected. This wasn't revenge in the dramatic, cinematic sense. It was strategy, patience, and clarity. By acting calmly, deliberately, and observing carefully, I had reclaimed control over the narrative. I had transformed betrayal into empowerment. The first cracks in their perfect facade were growing into visible fractures, and I knew that the world around them would soon see what I had known all along. And through it all, I reminded myself, dignity, awareness, and calm resolve are far more powerful than rage. The truth has a way of revealing itself, sometimes quietly, sometimes with a sharp, undeniable impact. In the days following my confrontation with Lena and Max, I realized that while I had reclaimed my personal clarity, the larger consequences of their actions had not yet played out. It wasn't enough for me to know. The people around them, family, friends, even acquaintances, needed to see the reality of what had been hidden. I started with subtle exposure. Not accusations, not public humiliation. I shared facts with precision, clarity, and calm authority. It began with small conversations. To my sister Diana in Chicago, I sent an email detailing exactly what had happened. The secret wedding, the financial manipulations, the exclusion. I included photos and documents, not in anger, but as evidence of reality. "Diana, I want you to see this," I wrote. It's important that the truth be known, not for revenge, but so that accountability can exist. Her reply came quickly. Renati, I had no idea. I'm so proud of you for staying calm. This is devastating, but you've handled it with grace. The first ripple of consequence had begun. Next, I reached out to a cousin who had a social media following within our local community. I wasn't spreading gossip. I was documenting facts. Screenshots of the courthouse photos, copies of receipts, and the official wedding certificate were shared privately, not publicly. The response was immediate. Questions, murmurs, disbelief. People began to compare timelines, to ask who had been present at what event, to realize that something had been carefully concealed. Word spread, not maliciously, not vindictively, but as truth often does. The reality of Lena's actions and Max's passive complicity became clear to those who had once admired the couple. Friends who had attended small gatherings were suddenly asking, quietly, why I had never been invited, why the wedding had been secret, why the money I had contributed had been used without acknowledgement. I could feel the tension building in the social circles around them. People began to confront Max with subtle questions. Acquaintances approached Lena with incredulous disbelief. And all the while, I remained calm, my role not to attack, but to let truth take its natural course. The first public confrontation came at a community gathering. Lena and Max were present, smiling on the surface, but the smiles didn't reach their eyes. I had received a tip that someone had quietly mentioned the wedding to a mutual friend, and that friend had been brave enough to speak up in a group setting. So, Lena, the friend said casually, though with sharp undertones, wasn't your wedding last week? Sort of a surprise. Lena's face froze. Max's hands fidgeted. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. I watched silently from a distance, sipping my tea. I didn't intervene. I didn't need to. The exposure was happening naturally. People were connecting the dots, the strange absences, the hushed whispers, the stories that didn't add up. By the end of the evening, Lena and Max had no room to hide. Friends who had once admired them now looked at them with suspicion. Conversations I hadn't initiated were being had, quietly, firmly, bringing accountability into the open. Then came the financial consequences. Because I had meticulously documented every contribution I had made, the rent payments, the furniture purchases, the wedding dress money, the honeymoon funds, I was able to approach Lena calmly, formally, and request repayment for funds that had been misused. I presented a detailed record, copies for her and Max, and a polite but firm request for acknowledgement of the debt. Lena hesitated. Her eyes darted to Max, who looked guilty but passive. I spoke again, steady and calm. Lena, Max, this is not punishment, this is accountability. I am asking you to recognize the resources you used that were not yours to spend, and to take steps to correct it. It's as simple as acknowledging what was done and making it right. Max, finally speaking with a hesitant voice, said, Renate, I don't know what to say. I let the pause stretch, letting the weight of responsibility settle. You can start by acknowledging the truth publicly and making amends privately, I said. That is all I ask. Over the next week, Lena and Max took small steps toward accountability. Repayments were made, partially at first with promises to complete them. Socially, they began to confront their actions indirectly. Apologies to friends, acknowledgement of exclusion, and an uneasy acceptance of the truth. It wasn't a dramatic apology. It wasn't a tearful confession in the middle of a town square. It was small, measured, unavoidable. The consequences were moral, social, and practical, and they could not escape them. I watched quietly, the satisfaction of calm justice filling me in ways rage never could. By acting deliberately, documenting meticulously, and letting truth take its natural course, I had ensured that the betrayal would not remain hidden. It would not fester in silence. Lena and Max had to face the reality of their choices. The final piece of public consequence came unexpectedly. I received an invitation to a small community forum, a gathering of neighbors and friends to discuss local events. It wasn't related to my personal life at all, but someone had raised the story in conversation. People were curious, concerned, and surprised by the unfolding truth. I attended quietly, not to speak, but to observe. And as I listened, I realized the ripple effect had grown larger than I could have imagined. Conversations about honesty, boundaries, and trust were happening in living rooms, kitchens, and cafes. Lena and Max's story had become a cautionary tale, not gossip, not rumor, but a testament to the consequences of betrayal and manipulation. It was, in a strange way, empowering. Not just for me, but for anyone who had been silenced, excluded, or manipulated. The truth had been revealed. The consequences were being felt, and all I had done was act with clarity, patience, and integrity. Through it all, I maintained my own dignity. I did not gloat. I did not publicly shame. I allowed the truth to unfold naturally, ensuring that Lena and Max were held accountable without resorting to cruelty. And in that, I found a profound sense of peace. The public consequences had not only affected them, but they had also allowed me to reclaim my own narrative. I was no longer the mother who had been excluded, manipulated, and used. I was the observer, the strategist, the woman who had acted with intelligence and calm resolve in the face of betrayal. Justice had not been violent or dramatic. It had been deliberate, moral, and social, and it had been effective. In the days that followed, I began to notice subtle shifts in Lena and Max. Their interactions were tense, cautious, and sincere in ways they hadn't been before. They had learned, slowly, that deceit carries consequences, and that trust, once broken, is hard to regain. And for me, the public consequence was more than social accountability. It was a personal liberation, the freedom to live without fear of manipulation, without the weight of hidden betrayal pressing against my chest. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. The storm of deceit had passed, leaving clarity, awareness, and the quiet satisfaction of a truth fully revealed. The days after the public exposure of Lena and Max's deceit were quieter, yet heavier in their own way. The initial shock, the adrenaline of confrontation, and the tension of accountability had all passed. What remained was the slow, delicate process of rebuilding my life, restoring my peace, and healing the emotional wounds that had cut so deeply. I began with small steps. Mornings became mine again, sacred and undisturbed. I brewed coffee slowly, savoring the aroma, letting the warmth of the cup seep into my hands and heart. I returned to the routines I had once loved, tending my garden, walking through the neighborhood, reading in the afternoons while the sunlight spilled through the living room window. Each action was a reclaiming of normalcy, a gentle assertion that my life was still my own. Reconnection became essential. I reached out to family members I had distanced myself from during the years of caretaking and manipulation. My sister Diana called weekly, no longer with the anxiety of gossip, but with the shared laughter and stories of family. My nieces and nephews began stopping by more often, bringing youthful energy and light into spaces that had felt heavy for far too long. Even friends noticed the change. They commented on the steadiness in my voice, the calm in my demeanor, the quiet authority that radiated from my every action. I realized, with some surprise, that healing had a visible mark, one that others could sense, even before they heard the stories. I also began reflecting deeply on the lessons I had learned. The betrayal had been profound, yes, but it had taught me more about boundaries, about discernment, and about the quiet power of observation. I wrote in my journal daily, not out of obsession or bitterness, but to map my growth, to remind myself of the steps I had taken, and to document the wisdom I had gained. One entry read, "Pain reveals truth, betrayal reveals character, and calm, deliberate action reveals power." I read those words often, letting them sink in. They became a mantra, a grounding force, a reminder that while I could not change the past, I could navigate the present with clarity and purpose. There were moments of lingering sadness, of course, seeing Lena and Max at gatherings, hearing whispers, glimpsing their uneasy interactions. These stirred old emotions, but instead of anger or despair, I approached these moments with reflection. I reminded myself that their choices had consequences. They were living with the results of their actions, and I, by contrast, was free. Freedom, I realized, wasn't dramatic. It wasn't shouted from rooftops or celebrated in grand gestures. It was subtle, like the first warm rays of sunlight on a crisp morning. It was in the laughter I shared with friends. It was in the slow, deliberate planting of flowers in my garden. It was in the quiet certainty that my moral compass had remained intact, even when others had faltered. Healing also meant reclaiming my relationship with my son. Our dynamic had been fractured, though not entirely broken. I approached him with caution, but also with openness. We began talking more regularly, about mundane things at first, his work, his hobbies, little updates about life. Slowly, we navigated the deeper waters, trust, accountability, and the lessons learned from Lena's actions. It was not easy. Trust, once fractured, takes time to rebuild. But we both recognized the necessity of honesty and the effort to communicate without deceit. It became a gradual dance of patience and understanding, and I realized that healing isn't linear. It's layered, nuanced, and sometimes unpredictable. I also focused on my personal boundaries. I learned to say no without guilt. I learned to pause before acting, to evaluate whether my help was being requested genuinely or manipulated for ulterior motives. The world had taught me harsh lessons about generosity and trust, but now I approach these values with wisdom rather than blind impulse. And in this, I found a strange sense of joy, not in the absence of betrayal, but in the presence of clarity. I could extend kindness without fear. I could offer help without losing myself. I could exist in the world without being defined by others' manipulations. Community involvement became a source of healing as well. I volunteered at local charities, attended neighborhood events, and slowly, deliberately re-established my role as a valued member of my surroundings. Each interaction was authentic, untainted by deceit, and each connection served as a reminder that trust, when earned, can be deep, meaningful, and lasting. One evening, as I returned from a local book club, I paused in front of my home and breathed deeply. The night was calm, the air cool and crisp. I thought about the storm of betrayal that had once rocked my life. I thought about the deliberate steps I had taken to confront it, to document it, and to allow consequences to unfold naturally. And I smiled. Healing, I realized, was not about forgetting. It wasn't about pretending the pain had never happened. It was about integrating those experiences into my life in a way that strengthened me rather than weakened me. I acknowledged the hurt, honored the lessons, and chose to move forward with dignity. I also embraced gratitude. Gratitude for the clarity I had gained. Gratitude for the family who supported me. Gratitude for the moments of calm, the quiet afternoons, the laughter and warmth that now filled my home. Gratitude for the realization that my life was my own, fully, completely, and beautifully. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Lena and Max faded from the center of my life. They existed, yes, but no longer held power over my emotions. Their misdeeds remained a cautionary memory, a reminder of boundaries, trust, and personal strength, but they did not dictate my peace. I found new joy in the ordinary: morning coffee, the smell of freshly baked bread, the sound of birds in my garden, laughter with friends and family. These small sensory moments grounded me, reminded me that life could be beautiful, even after betrayal. By the time months had passed, I felt whole again, not unscathed. Scars remained, memories lingered, but empowered, strong, centered, peaceful. I realized that healing isn't dramatic. It's a slow, steady process built on self-awareness, reflection, and deliberate action. It's choosing to live fully, even when life has tested you. And in that realization, I found not only closure, but a quiet, profound sense of happiness. As I sit here now, sipping the last warm drops of tea, I think about how life has a way of testing us, not with grand gestures or cinematic drama, but with subtle, sharp lessons that sneak in quietly and leave lasting impressions. Lena's wedding, Max's complicity, the betrayal that cut deep. These were not moments I could ignore, nor ones I would ever forget. Yet in the aftermath, I discovered something profound: the power to reclaim your narrative, even when others try to write it for you. That power doesn't come from anger or from dramatic confrontation. It comes from clarity, patience, and steadfastness. It comes from observing carefully, documenting truth, and letting reality unfold in its own natural course. I learned that boundaries are not selfish. They are protective. Generosity must be discerning. Love must be cautious without losing its warmth. Trust is precious, and it must be earned consistently, not manipulated through lies or deception. And perhaps most importantly, I learned that healing is not linear, but layered, gradual, and infinitely possible. The house is quiet now, the garden thriving, the sunlight spilling across familiar spaces. I am rebuilding, piece by piece, the life I thought I had lost to betrayal. I am reconnecting with family, nurturing friendships, embracing the small joys that often go unnoticed. And I am finally free from manipulation, from fear, and from the lingering shadows of deceit. And yet I wonder, how many of us have been manipulated, excluded, or taken for granted quietly by people we thought we could trust? How many of us have given again and again only to find our kindness used as a tool for someone else's gain? If you are listening to this story, perhaps you recognize a piece of yourself in mine. Perhaps you too have been hurt, excluded, or betrayed. And if so, I want you to hear this. Your strength lies not in revenge, nor in anger, but in clarity, in patience, in observing and responding with calm, deliberate action. You have the power to reclaim your story, to restore your peace, and to build a life rooted in dignity and truth. As I reflect on my journey, I realize that Lena and Max's actions, though painful, became catalysts for growth. Their deceit taught me about boundaries, discernment, and resilience. Their betrayal highlighted the importance of observation, documentation, and the subtle but profound power of allowing truth to unfold naturally. And in this, I found peace, not because they suffered, but because I reclaimed myself. Not because I sought vengeance, but because I acted with awareness and integrity. And not because the past disappeared, but because I chose to step fully into a future of my own design. So I leave you with this thought. The world may test you, manipulate you, even betray you. But your response, the deliberate, calm, and informed choices you make, will define the life you live and the peace you carry. Would you have acted the way I did? Would you have waited, watched, and allowed the truth to surface naturally? Or would you have confronted with anger and regret? I wonder, truly, what you would do. Take a moment to think about your own boundaries, your own trust, your own life. And remember, clarity, patience, and integrity are more powerful than any storm of deceit could ever be. Because in the end, life isn't about the betrayals we endure. It's about the peace we reclaim, the dignity we maintain, and the strength we discover within ourselves. If this story touched you today, if it reminded you of something you've lived through, please don't keep it inside. Tell me your story. I wonder, which part of this story stayed with you? Which moment did you feel deep in your chest? And where are you listening from? Tell me in the comments. I personally read every single comment myself because your words might be the light someone else needs tonight. And if you haven't yet, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Because here, at True Heart Voices, every story deserves to be heard, and every heart deserves to heal. Did you like my story? If you listened all the way to the end, drop a number 1 in the comments. If you enjoyed it, you can support me by liking the video and sending a small tip. I've got many more life stories just like this on my channel. So make sure to subscribe and check them out. I've added 2 new stories on screen that everyone loves. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one. With love.